call the, we like to call our meeting back into session.
Clint, could you hear that? Test. Is that working out there? Okay.
All right. Now that our audience is thinned out a bit, we'll move on to agenda item number. Actually, we're going to take up this administrative. Say again.
Hey, page 13.
Page 13.
In your package.
In the package here.
Right. See, before, if I might do the introduction, before we talk about Spruce Hill Road, the reason nothing has ever been done with regard to Spruce Hill Road is because you could not spend public funds, tax dollars, for private purposes. Okay. It always had to serve a public purpose. And the private road up there, you could never identify an owner of the road. Citations from sedimentation control could not be issued for the erosion problems, and so on. The policy we had basically said that the first line of what you see under number 1, no town funds or town staff shall be used for the maintenance of private roads and driveways in Lake Lure except upon prior approval by the town council. It seems like we were allowed an exception, but I understand really that particular policy, the way it was written, is illegal, and it did not satisfy the purposes of the law. But I understand now that what we have, and you, Ron and William, have reviewed this and blessed it. The added language defines or gives us examples of public purposes. And as a matter of fact, state law right now, the appeals court has never defined public purpose in North Carolina state law. What we have there is what between William and Ron came up with, provided said expenditures are for a public purpose and otherwise allowed by law. For purposes of this resolution and policy, an expenditure is for a public purpose where it benefits the citizens of the town generally rather than for the benefit of persons, entities, or interests. And that is really the catch-all there. This would allow us to do maintenance on private roads and driveways under the examples, but not limited to these examples, where the town owns real property, which we do in this case, served by the private road or driveway, where the maintenance on private roads or driveways is deemed necessary to protect the environmental quality of the lake, which, of course, as everyone knows, is owned by the town for the benefit of the citizens. So protecting that environmental quality is definitely a public purpose. And where the expenditure is in connection with and promotes economic development, and where the expenditure otherwise promotes the public health, safety, and welfare. During one of the meetings on Spruce Hill, I asked if there was a safety problem. Yes, there is. Every time that mud washes out into the road, it causes people to drive differently, avoid it, or slow down quickly because they see it and try to go through it. So we have the safety aspect. It's also a public nuisance. But that's more for the discussion of the Spruce Hill project. But by adopting this policy, it would allow us to approve the Spruce Hill Road project based on everything we know and all the new information we have once we get to it, which would mitigate the public nuisance. It would eliminate the safety problem of it washing into the road, and it would mitigate the sediment going into the lake to better take care of the environmental quality of the lake.
So have we gone on into discussion on the Spruce Hill Road?
Well, we will, but we have to adopt this first. Because we could discuss Spruce Hill, but we can't approve Spruce Hill without this policy being in effect.
Yeah. Well, there's things about this policy I like, and there's things about this policy I don't like too. You know, I mean, so we make the decision on this one that, and I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying the other one said we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it, so we didn't have to justify doing it in one case, and try to justify in the next case why we're not gonna do it.
Right.
Now we're putting us back into where it's subjective and we're gonna have to justify, well, we decided to do this project, but we're not gonna do the next three. And, you know, that just, that puts us in a.
And each one would be on its own basis.
Have to be.
Of course, right.
Have to be. So we need to understand, we do this.
Right.
We're opening up that,
And you think about this, and I guess we could talk Spruce Hill Road problem at the same time. Okay, we cannot spend public funds for a private purpose, but we have already expended more public funds than what it would have cost to fix it years ago through research, attorney opinions, staff time, etc. I mean, it's unbelievable. Even one of the recent rains a month or so ago, the guy that lives there that comes down and scrapes the road with his own personal tractor, private tractor, gets the mud out. We had our fire trucks out there blocking traffic so he could get out into the road, pick it up and move it out of the road.
oh, there's no question it's gotta be fixed.
So yeah, we've already expended more in public funds over time doing those kinds of things.
Does that, and this may go to Clint or to Shannon, that little development, is their road even designated, the street? Is there a plat somewhere that somebody has that shows where that road, I mean, I drove up there in four-wheel drive, low four-wheel drive, and that cost me $1.50 to get my car washed afterwards at the spray thing out at Sunnyview, but I'm just saying, the mud was this deep as after the big rain we had, you know, but when you get up there, I mean, one road goes up here to a house and one road goes this way to a house. Where does the road go?
Well, the lower section comes to right into a plat. The upper section goes into an old right-of-way that was part of the.
How do you get to the upper section?
Keep driving.
Which one of those, is that up one of those driveways?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, stay to the right.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I thought
Left
left.
takes you down the lower piece. If you stay right,
My bad.
it takes you up into the old Draper plan. Rights of way are still there. They're really deep trails now, but they were meant to be a nice subdivision like you see up in Lermont right now. It was an extension of the Lermont plan that was never finished.
Gotcha.
And this section, this little piece where someone had purchased, I think it was Ellen Pearson, purchased a number of Lermont lots and redesigned those and put in a right of way that was not very well uniform the way it was put in. So there's.
Okay. Well, let me make a comment about just about some of this discussion, and I hear this way too often about whether we should or shouldn't do something because we're going to set a precedent. And if we set a precedent, then we go down a slippery slope because then somehow we can't, in an intelligent and rational way, tell somebody no or yes based on the merits of a particular situation. I for one, town council, believe we are perfectly capable of making intelligent decisions about these kinds of issues one way or another in what we decide is in the public's best interest. And I, for one, do not want to be paralyzed from taking a reasonable action or adopting a reasonable ordinance because it's precedent setting and we can't act like intelligent government leaders and make an intelligent decision on doing something or not doing something. So I understand the premise, you know, that someone's going to stand up here and say, well, you did it for him, and why can't you do it for me? We should be prepared to answer, this is why we did it for him, and we're not doing it for you. I mean, am I operating?
Just understand we will have to do that.
Well, we will, and we shouldn't shy away from having to do that. Yeah.
And I would just say, as long as you're in the confines of the general statutes, I mean, you want to make sure that you meet the law.
The law.
Right. That's right.
Absolutely.
I want to mention too that previously we had talked about this one as well as Night Holloway on the cost sharing aspect, and we're still pursuing that. And Shannon, so far, what do you have in responses from Spruce Hill Road on cost sharing?
I sent out the second letter, as you guys know,
right now, there are 24 lots in Spruce Hill. We own 10.
Correct.
We received letters back from 1, 2, 3 owners, and those 3 owners combined own 4. So 10 plus 4 is 14. So we have 14 lots of the 24. Those owners are willing to participate, but we don't have responses back for the others. Now, the second letter I sent out was basically kind of turning the screw a little bit, as you guys asked me to, and basically pointing out the fact that we're not going to do anything unless we get participation from everybody in there. These are the folks that have contributed, which means you haven't, and we'd love for you to sign this letter. And I sent them a second copy of the first letter sent to them so they can sign. Spruce Hill.
And you know, if you read back on this, our notes, we can't take legal action anyways.
Right, and that's another thing that, Ron, if you would explain that, that's a separate policy and issue altogether. So this, what we have before us today, if we adopted this policy, we could then approve fixing Spruce Hill Road and funding it, but it would not impact whatsoever on cost sharing. Right. That doesn't even come into play in that regard. So I wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that. Now, and the difference between this one versus Night Hall Away is that one, that Night Hall Away is not dumping into a public road. It's not a public nuisance in that regard. It's not dumping into the lake. So, very big difference between the two, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I don't have see any problem at all making the distinction between the two, where one's in the public interest and one is not.
Right there on winter day, you'll see how hazardous it is.
I'm sorry.
I said just drive down that road on winter's day when it's all frozen and mud and ice and all that stuff.
So has this language that Commissioner Weber just read for us in here, has that been vetted?
Yes,
is that acceptable to our town attorney?
Yes, both the town attorney and myself have reviewed it. What we wanted to make sure is that the policy was in keeping with state law. And he has provided you an opportunity with a policy change by resolution to do what I think the majority of board members want to do in this case. It does require the board to make future decisions based on certain criteria, but under state law, I think you would have to do that anyway. So I think this is in keeping with what William would want me to say. One thing, if he was here, is this only deals with private roads and driveways. It does not deal with anything else on private property. So we still have to be careful with that. We're only dealing with private roads and driveways in this instance.
That's right.
Somebody want to?
Well, Michelle, you're the town clerk. If we wanted to adopt this today, what resolution number would it be? Would it be 1805-05-1?
That's correct. We'll just use the date.
Right.
Yeah. 180501.
Okay. So I make a motion, Mr. Mayor, that we adopt resolution number 18-05-1, adopting an amended administrative policy for the town of Lake Lure regarding the maintenance of private roads and driveways in Lake Lure.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Kilby seconds that. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that then moves us into the discussion about what to do about Spruce Hill Road sedimentation concerns.
I want to thank Clint primarily for his wonderful summary on this and all the documentation. And if you've seen the emails that I've been forwarding from Bob Washburn, along with all the documentation, this is a problem that's been going on over 50 years. His personal experience, over 20 years or around 20 years that we have records on. There was obviously a great study done on what was needed with the Carlo Pruca driveway study that was done back in '02, so leave it at that. That's One of the most sensible suggestions for an outcome was made by state officials who said that by the time all the research was done trying to find a financially responsible party, the town could have already fixed the problem, and we could have done it years ago at much cheaper cost than what it'll cost us today. But we have what we have, and it's something I believe we definitely need to fix, period.
Clint, I agree. Clint did a great job on this, getting the facts. It goes way back. I'm sure you had to do a little digging. Of course, you've been involved with it before.
Sorry for so long.
Well, that's okay. It took long to, I mean, I understood it after I read what you put together, so I appreciate you doing that. Do we have a current plan that if we vote today to fix it, that we know what we're going to do? Or?
We don't have a plan. We have some suggestions. The plan that you have in your packet is a suggestion that was brought by the Natural Resource Conservation Service in 2002, which I think was the year that was drawn up.
That's it.
Yes. Now, that plan does not involve any kind of pavement or changing the grade of the road, which in my personal opinion, I think is critical if we're looking at keeping that sustainable. Otherwise, it's going to continue to have gravel, it's going to have to continue to be scraped, the ditches are going to have to be maintained, and there's also an issue with underground utilities based on conversation with Mr. Melton. So given all those considerations, if you're looking for a long-term solution that's going to keep that site from bleeding, pavement or chip and seal, something along those lines, as well as establishing good ditches that are lined with some type of erosion control material is going to be critical to keeping that road in good shape.
So this goes back to 02, so it's
Yes.
16 years old. I think we're going to have a new plan.
Right.
I mean, there's some aspects of that plan that are still good,
Right.
such as the drainage in the upper part of the slope. You got to get the water off the road, and that's the place that you're going to do it is up there where you actually have a place to put it. If you go too far down the hill,
Bring it down to the bottom.
yeah, you're below grade there. So unless you significantly bring that grade up, you're not going to be able to convey the water off the road.
If you recall 2 meetings ago, when we had the last discussion on Spruce Hill, we had an estimate that took care of paving 50 feet in, and I don't recall if that one included dressing up the ditches with riprap and so on. Anybody here that does? Yeah, it did have the riprap, thank you. And that was like $67.50. To implement some of these measures that were originally proposed back then, along with what we just talked about, even in today's dollars, I would say a reasonable amount, in my opinion, to make a good dent in it would be $10,000.
I agree with that.
I think that's a good one.
Do we want to pick our number before we look at a proposal, or just,
Well, we've got the one proposal. I would say let's just approve $10,000 and ask for bids on it. If they happen to come out more, then we'll have it.
bring us what you can do for $10,000?
And another approach is we could have David take this and work with the people and see what they can come up with,
Right. Yep, I'm good with that.
Okay.
along with Clint providing his wise advice in the meantime.
For whatever that's worth.
All right. Somebody want to offer a motion?
I'll make,
Well,
go ahead, Steve.
well, okay.
You worked on it.
I make the motion that we approve up to $10,000 for work on Spruce Hill Road to mitigate a public nuisance, eliminate a public safety hazard, and to mitigate sedimentation and erosion into the lake, which are all public purposes.
Okay. Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Bob? Any other discussion, additions, or? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? Well, Commissioner Cameron. That brings us to that point.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Oh, that's his permanent.
That's my
Or
responsibility.
I owe him an alcoholic beverage. So, is there a second to that motion?
I second.
All right, a second. All those favor, aye. Adjourn.
Thank you.
Good job, guys.